It's really difficult for people with Asperger syndrome, with autism, to find friends. It's near impossible. Sometimes it is impossible. Now, I got to admit that if I were to take out a sheet of paper and write down the names of all my close friends, not counting family members, I'd have a blank sheet of paper. I mentioned that in another video a week or two ago. I really don't have any close friends, and there are a lot of people with whom I am friendly, and I guess I would call them my friends, but these are people that I'm really close with. People that I would share intimate details about my life that I could really rely on and trust to keep those things confidential. Those type of close friends I don't have. Now, I've had some in my past, particularly when I was a kid. I had a really good friend in the neighborhood. Young teenager, I had a good friend that I knew, and that's about it. I just never have been able to attract people to be good friends. Friends, yeah, but I'm talking about close friends. So the question is, why is it that people with autism have such a difficult time making friends? A couple reasons. I came up with 6, but, a lot of people with autism do have good friends. And they do have close friends, really close friends, but it's difficult for them. It's challenging for nearly everybody with autism. Well, let's explore that question, and number 1 is this. Again, I've got 6 of these. It's just kind of, and tell me if you agree with this, but it's just kind of exhausting for both people. I mean, if you, let's say you go out to dinner with somebody, maybe meet a good friend for lunch, and what are you going to talk about? Well, what you find is you got to struggle to have a conversation. At least I do, because quite frankly, I'm not a talker. I'm really not good at a conversation. Now, people that I like to hang out with are people who are chatty. People that just don't seem to know when to shut up, and that bothers a lot of people because other people like to get a word in edgewise, but depends on what they're talking about. But most of those people I like to hang around because, well, they kind of carry the load and I don't have to. And I may grunt or make a face once in a while, or maybe repeat something they said just so it seems like I'm paying attention, which sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not, depending on the topic. And the only exceptions are people who talk about things that I find repulsive, and some people do that. Particularly, I used to go to the gym and work out almost every day, and some of those guys, man, they're way, they would talk about things I just don't want to hear, let alone discuss. But it's exhausting for both parties. It's exhausting for me, particularly, to try to keep up a conversation, and it's challenging for the other person because they're constantly trying to draw some feedback out of me, and I'm not responding the way neurotypical people would respond. That gift for conversation is just not there. That takes us to number 2. There is a deficit, and I think we all know this, there is a deficit in social skills. We understand this is called mind blindness, where we just don't, it's just not there. It's like not having eyesight. If you don't have it, you don't have it. If you don't have that ability to socialize, you just don't have it. People who do have it don't get it. They don't understand how you cannot. It's so natural to them, they can't understand how you can't not do this. Well, just try closing your eyes for a few minutes and try to walk around. See how many things you bump into. After a while, you quit trying, right? That's what it's like to have mind blindness. You try. And you try, and you try, particularly, when you're little, when you're in those early grades in school, you try and you want to fit in. And when you're adolescent, it becomes really difficult, really challenging. But you just don't. And finally, you come to realize, you know what? I don't fit in. I have a deficit in social skills, so you accept it and you find an alternate way to function in society. And it's really difficult. Everyone knows this because we talk about it 1,000 times, but, finding gainful employment, finding ungainful employment, doing anything where it requires social interaction on almost any level, virtually impossible for people with autism. Now, if you can't just basically fundamentally socialize with people, even on the most rudimentary level, are you going to have close friends? And again, some people do, but it's very difficult. So, number two is we have a very obvious deficit in social skills, and because of that, number three, going back to childhood, teen years, adolescence, people with autism tend to be viewed as a social liability. Social settings are a social environment pretty much established on a hierarchy where people want to be lifted up. They want to climb up the social ladder. There used to be a thing in the newspapers back in the day, which is before my day. It was a big deal to have a social section of the newspaper. Maybe they still do that. I don't know, but who's who, and they would say who is doing what and who is getting married, and everybody would really get into that because that's the way people think. That's the way we are. Nature has construed us and configured us in such a way that survival of the fittest, well, the fittest are those who can socialize the best. So that's the way we seem to be programmed by nature, is to want to socialize and climb that social ladder. We see that not just in humans, but basically any mammals, particularly, what do you call them, apes, monkeys, what I'm talking about. They all have a social hierarchy. That is the way nature has provided for us to function. We don't really fit into that. In fact, not only do we not fit, but we are seen as a social liability. So if people hang out with a person with autism, well, that person with autism is weird. This person is hanging out with a weird person, so that person must also be weird. So we're not going to hang out with that person. Okay, well, that person doesn't want to hang out with us anymore because nobody wants to hang out with them if they hang out with us. And so that pulls them down the social tier, the social hierarchy, so we become a social liability. And that's a real problem, I heard a guy once with autism mention how he would go to school and he had this superpower where he would go and sit down at a lunch table at the school cafeteria and everybody get up and walk away. And then he'd go to another lunch table and he'd sit down and everybody get up and walk away. Just amazing. He had this ability. And he was being funny, he was making a joke out of it, but the fact of the matter is, it's like Moses parting the Red Sea. You walk into a crowd and people see you and they just kind of turn their head and hope you don't say anything to them because, and a lot of people, they're not very, very tactful about it. They're not very subtle. They try to be, but we are a liability to them. So it's really hard to make close friends when virtually everybody, maybe a few exceptions, but virtually everybody sees you as a liability, somebody that, I don't want to hang out with this guy. Number four is people with autism have a very obvious deficit in communication skills. It's really difficult to carry on a conversation. Kind of touched on that a moment ago. And as I've said previously in other videos, I can think perfectly clear most of the time. But when I get around people, there is something that causes my thinking process to scramble. Remember we talked about this? And when somebody approaches, or as they approach, it's kind of like the scrambling intensifies. And then you're expected to speak. And when you speak, what comes out is gibberish. You get your words misplaced and, just sounds silly. And the person hears that and they think, this person's a scatterbrain. Well, they're right, but they're the ones who scattered the brain. But they don't realize that. They don't understand that. They think you're that way all the time. And so okay, this guy's kind of weird. Let's go on. They may be polite, wave to you, nice talking to you. Try to stay away from that guy, But how are we going to make friends when you can't even communicate basically, fundamentally? Now, I've said this before, but I've always been very adept at public speaking. It's something I enjoy doing. I know I'm not the best in the world at it, but I like to do it, and I don't have a problem with it. So I get up in front of a crowd. I'm perfectly fine. I talk to the whole group of people. Could be hundreds, could be thousands. I actually enjoy that. It's to me, it's fun. But any one of those people in that crowd, if they were to approach me after I'm done speaking and try to talk to me, I'm just so self-conscious. And again, that scrambling comes in. I can't communicate. How do you make close friends when you can't talk to anybody? Well, there are a few people with whom you can communicate, and those people maybe will turn out to be your close friends, hopefully. But even then, you've got all those other things like the social liability, whatever, even if they can communicate well with you. And then there's that other thing that is called, trying to think what the term is. It is when there's an individual that you just can't communicate with at all. I mean, you just cannot connect with those people. I'll think of the term here in just a moment, but it's kind of like trying to talk to a robot and they're not real. You just cannot communicate to those people. If you can think of the term, put it in the comments section. I don't want to sit here and just kind of steer off into space until I think of it. So we tend to have a deficit in communication skills. Number 5, and this is a bit challenging. If you're going to talk to people and have a friend, you got to have some kind of common interest. I have some things that I find that I'm a little bit obsessive about. I like to talk about neurology. I like to talk about autism. I like to talk about psychopathy and things that like psychology and things along those lines. Your average Joe doesn't want to talk about that stuff. I mean, he may find it passively interesting, and some of the things that you say may be a little bit interesting, but they don't talk about that. Not all the time, every time. Okay, politics. I love politics. I don't talk about politics on this channel because I've offended about half the people. Then the next time I offend the other half the people. Then I've offended everyone. So religion, politics, we'll just leave that out. But social things, my mind is just attracted to that. And there are a lot of other people who like to talk about politics too, but not all the time, So we're talking about politics, and the next time they invite you over, everyone gets an invitation, and there's a little PS at the end. Please do not talk about politics. Geez, I wonder who they're thinking of when they put that in there. I know. But if you don't have common interest, a lot of guys like to talk about sports. Sorry, no interest whatsoever. Yeah, I can understand why they like it, but I just don't probably because I'm not athletic. What about cars? Yeah, I like cars. Obviously, I get so many of them. I don't go anywhere, but I've got 5 vehicles. Yeah, I like cars, but I really don't have that mechanical aptitude, and that's kind of strange for people with autism because they do tend to be a little bit more mechanically oriented than average people. I guess I'm one of the exceptions, but when they start talking about the details of mechanics and so forth, I'm just lost. I got no idea what to talk about. So we're not on the same wavelength. So there's this problem with common interests that most people have a broad spectrum of things they can talk about, and they have their particular interest, but it's more than just one or two things, which people with autism, no, not so much. Number 6 rather, is, and I kind of touched on this a minute ago, but people with autism, we just can't help but to feel inferior or to feel self-conscious. Is that true of all of us? I don't think so. I know people with autism, they go the other extreme. They just won't settle down. They're just overboard. It's a way of dealing with our autism is they're too expressive. But a lot of us, we just feel inferior. We feel self-conscious. we feel like we have low self-esteem. Well, we do have low self-esteem, many. And we feel like we're kind of worthless, and people are better than us. People don't like to talk to that person. They don't want to be friends with somebody who has very, very, very low self-esteem. Somebody you have to constantly be pumping up. They just don't do that. So we have these things that are hindrances to having close friends, and that's why. Now, what do we do about it? I don't really know, because I'm not sure you can do anything about it. What I do know is this: I don't have any close friends, and I really don't feel there's a major deficit in my life because of that. Maybe you do if you're autistic. I really don't. I mean, again, there's people with whom I'm friendly, people I can talk to, and I'm okay with that. And if I really need help, there's always professional services out there which you can take advantage of. So I'm perfectly fine with it, but those are some of the reasons. And if you can think of some others that I can't think of, you can leave those in the comment section below. See those two rectangles on the screen? If you want the conversation to continue, all you got to do is click one of those two boxes and the conversation will continue, and talk as long as you want to. We got a lot of videos, but if not, thanks for stopping by, and we will see you all next time.